got more and more respect these days for the humble Webquest / Hyperdoc / Gameboard / immersive digital multimedia experience / clickable infographic / playlist / choice board. When it comes to sharing information and contemporary texts with your students, there's just so much available online right now. It's incredible. Students can see actors practicing behind the scenes at the Royal Shakespeare Company. They can read John Green's thoughts on drafting. They can hear Jason Reynolds read his children's book, There Was a Party for Langston, while the illustrations wash across the screen. Students can learn MLA with Purdue, watch Joy Harjo read her own poetry, listen to our country's top researchers and academics and startup founders on podcasts and TED stages. So cool, right? With all these immersive, multimodal resources waiting for our students, building their roadmaps to what's available becomes an important, and I've got to say, pretty fun job. We want to present them with great options and help them feel positive and excited about the experience of exploring. We want to give them possibilities across modes and from many perspectives, so they can use their agency to learn in ways that feel good to them and connect to at least some aspects of what they discover. We want to provide options in terms of how they synthesize the information they take in so they can use it later on. As I see it, here are some of the benefits to building quality web quests for your students. Students have choice in what to explore, starting with what seems most interesting to them and continuing to make choices until they're out of time. Plugging into the kinds of contemporary connections available online, like listening to author interviews, visiting real-world settings, seeing adaptations, and viewing connected social media, can often make learning feel more relevant for students. You can build in resources across genres and modes, letting students listen, watch, read, explore, view, and zoom in according to their preferences. With Webquest, it's easier to provide more viewpoints, voices, and perspectives, helping you to more easily diversify your curriculum. Sharing a Webquest is less stressful than giving a lecture and more likely to keep students engaged. You'll save a tree, since photocopying a packet of information won't be necessary. Last but not least, you can take advantage with a Webquest of the incredible wealth of informational resources available online. Today on the pod, let's talk through a few examples. And I've got to tell you, this podcast has an extensive array of complementary visuals. So I really want you to head over to nowsparkcreativity.com and see them, and also pick up the free Webquest templates that go along with this episode. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. All right, so hopefully with that long introduction, I've convinced you that a good Webquest has a lot to offer you right now and a lot to offer your students. So let's just drill down a bit and walk through some examples. I have really been designing a lot of these Webquests / choice boards / clickable infographics lately, and it has been really rewarding and really interesting. And that is what has led me to want to focus a whole podcast around it. So I just want to walk you through some of the ways that I've been experimenting with it, and hopefully you'll find something that feels like a nice springboard for you, or something that you'd like to try that's similar to me, or maybe it will just spark an idea for you for your curriculum that's totally different, but somehow a cousin of these possible examples. Okay, so let's start with a quick Webquest you might include with a Shakespeare unit. This week, I discovered just how wonderful the Royal Shakespeare Company's Instagram feed can be for giving just like little peeks behind the curtain on contemporary Shakespeare. There was a post about from the caption, quote, a stylized neo-noir game adaptation of Macbeth. There was a look at the lighting design for A Midsummer Night's Dream. There was just a lot of really cool little glimpses, but I wouldn't necessarily just want to tell students like, go check out the Instagram feed for the Royal Shakespeare Company. I would want to give them a little more guidance. And so that's the point of this kind of micro web quest that I would create, pointing them to specific reels I'd like them to see. So not just like all 200 reels. I would describe different reels within the web quest and let them click the ones that seem interesting. So the way I started out my design here was to create a little Shakespeare themed template in Canva. So I opened up just a square. I think I made it like 8 inches by 8 inches. And then I searched in Elements for a picture of the Globe Theater. And I sort of looked around and I ended up going with a stylized illustrated Globe Theater. And I'm telling you this because this is kind of how I'm starting my design on a lot of these web quests. Some kind of visual background, whether it's in slides or Canva or PowerPoint or whatever you like to use, that is going to spark a little interest. Okay, so rather than like a black background, I've got the Globe Theater. So right away, I'm establishing the theme, sort of hopefully getting folks a little bit interested in what's going to come. But then I want my text to show up, all my little miniature descriptions of the exciting links that students can click. And so I dropped just some white boxes around on my image of the Globe Theater. And I wanted students to know that they could click on those boxes. So next to the white boxes, I put little circles with the click button in them, like a little arrow with little dashes around it. So right away, my web quest is looking sort of like a web page where students can just click anywhere around it to see different things. And now I have this template and I could use it for any kind of Shakespeare-driven exploration. But what I'm going to do is populate it with the reels that I thought would be most interesting for students. So in this case, I'm going to have them meet the interns at the RSC costume department. I'm going to show them this sort of funny reality TV spoof called Princess Responsibilities, in which some royalty inside of a Shakespeare play sort of jokingly talk about their life as royalty, even though, of course, they're actually actors. I'm going to show them a reel that's a promo for this cool collaboration between Radiohead and the Royal Shakespeare Company for a show called Hamlet: Hail to the Thief, which I feel like students could be really intrigued by. The idea of a band collaborating with Shakespeare, especially such a popular band. And then some more, right? I don't need to go on and on with this example. The point is I'm filling my little card with all kinds of reels that could show students different viewpoints into what goes on in a professional Shakespearean theater company. And some students might watch one of them 3 times or like get really intrigued by it and sort of focus in on one reel or maybe 2 reels. Other students might zip through all 5 really quickly. That's okay. That's part of the process of choice. There's no like numbering. It doesn't say watch this one first or this one's the most important or watch this one and answer these questions. It's just an exploration. And we'll talk a little bit more later on the kinds of sort of parallel activities that students can be doing to process the information that they are taking in. But for now, we're just sort of talking about designing these web quests. Another thing I could do with this exact same template would be to go much deeper. I wouldn't have to just look at reels on the Instagram feed at the RSC. I could send them with the exact same little template to see a college TED Talk, Hip Hop and Shakespeare, or to actually go on a tour of the Globe Theater, or to watch John and Hank Green's YouTube channel Crash Course with the video Straight Outta Stratford upon Avon. Or I could have them go see Shakespeare's handwriting or whatever, right? Everybody's got their favorite Shakespeare resources online. There are a ton. So those are a couple of quick examples of how I might design this very first web quest that we're going to look at, my Shakespeare web quest. Now let's look at something totally different. Recently, I was working on my MLA resources and just giving them a brush up, an update, trying to make them as useful as possible. And I realized that it might be helpful for students and teachers to have a little kind of digital shelf that takes them to the most helpful online resources for the citation format that they're going to be using. Because the truth is, citation formats are so complicated and so difficult to pin down into like one quick poster or one activity or one guidebook, that the online resources really just do an incredible job. And trying to whittle them down into separate curriculum is maybe not even useful. Like I definitely created posters and a little guide and a project for students to create their own infographic and a game to review these concepts, plenty of introductory stuff and resources. But to really have it all, you almost have to go to an online resource or purchase a book, which most schools are not going to do for their high school students. And so I created this little digital shelf. I dropped in a picture of a wall, I dropped in a picture of a shelf, and I dropped in some iPads. And then on top of the iPads, I'm going to drop these links like the Purdue OWL MLA guide, or maybe you're using Chicago, or maybe you're using APA style, whatever. You can drop the guide. That's really what you want students to use. And then if you're going to allow it, you drop a citation generator in that format, and show your students that it's okay with you for them to use the citation generator because you're linking it on your resource shelf, right? And so now that I have that little Webquest, that little sort of choice board, I can send students to explore them as a Webquest, but then I can include it as a resource in every single research assignment that I give. Because it's so easy. I just copy the slide, paste it into the next resource set, the next project description, the next whatever. And students remember, oh yeah, I can always check Purdue OWL. Oh yeah, I can always use MyBib or whatever citation generator you're going to make available if you want to make one available. And that's just done forever, right? You can be always providing that resource because you've created this digital shelf. Now, this type of digital shelf can be helpful for all kinds of things, including providing resources that can help scaffold work for students. So like in this case, some students might be completely confident to find Purdue OWL by themselves or, search up their own citation generator and use it, and others would find that challenging. You can provide this kind of scaffolding across all kinds of topics: literary devices, how to use transitions, how to incorporate more sensory detail, advice for college essays, whatever it is. Creating a little digital shelf of resources that you can always make available to students through your task card or your writing activity description or your project prompt, whatever, is just a great go-to for you. Okay, next I want to walk through a couple of examples from work I did last month where I was trying to provide a lot of different models or mentors. So this is another great use of a kind of clickable infographic style Webquest where you want to let students explore some folks who have explored what they're going to be exploring. So for example, maybe your students are going to do a research project or a research paper. You might provide a Webquest where they can jump around and look at how other people express their research to the world. When I was working on this, I actually found such a fun little moment in a talk by Brene Brown where she's discussing how somebody was trying to figure out how to pin her down as a speaker and was trying to say that she was a storyteller, and she was like, does that describe me? Like, I'm a researcher, a storyteller? But the truth is, right, she is a storyteller. And this little first few minutes of the talk shows students that sometimes telling a story about your research is really a good way to get people to care and to get people to pay attention. And all the examples on the choice board Webquest that I created just take a different approach, right? Some of them are very formal academic papers. Some of them are nonfiction videos that really go the extra mile in trying to hook people's attention. Some of them are articles for like an article for a popular magazine that's clearly based on research and trying to convince the audience of something, but is written in the style of a popular magazine instead of the style of an academic journal. There are just so many ways to present research, right? And by creating a little clickable experience for students, they can sort of look around and be like, what do I want to see? And if they have time, they can see it all. But if they don't, maybe they're going to spend the entire time seeing how Brene Brown shares her research. Or maybe they're going to spend the entire time listening to NPR's Hidden Brain podcast and thinking about how they could present research in that way and what the hook feels like and what the interview segment is like and, how it all wraps together. So for this kind of board, what I have done, you could do it in a lot of different ways, but I basically just sort of carve out little spots all around the page in different little colorful rectangles. And I pop in an icon and a little description. And then students know, do I want to click on this? Am I interested in what Jonathan Haidt thinks about phones at school? Or do I want to click over here and see what this article about incorporating social media into performances of Romeo and Juliet is about? And it's all laid out for them like a menu, and all they have to do is click where their interest lies. Another option I want to bring up here on this subject of choice boards is to have students submit possibilities for mentor text. Now, this is something that is relatively new concept for me, and I've kind of been reading about it and having it suggested to me in a few different places lately. But one voice that's really pushing for it and has really interested me in the idea is Felicia Rose Chavez, and I'm reading her book right now called The Anti-Racist Writing Workshop, and she actually designs a whole college course that she teaches around the idea of letting students find the texts that they will study. She calls the course the Inspiration Lab. And I found this very interesting, thinking about how we could pull that idea into our classrooms and into our choice boards. So, for example, if you were creating a choice board of wonderful poetry, clickable choice board, Webquest, game board, etc. There's so many things you can call this. But you could invite students maybe to submit poetry that they'd like to see on that mentor choice board. And in that way, you're giving them the chance to surface authors that you might not even know about, or, maybe musical artists who have written incredible songs that they'd like to study through the lens of poetry. And so by giving them that chance to submit, you can take a quick peek if you want to and make sure it's something that you'll feel comfortable leading discussion on in class or having students do activities with. And you can talk about that with students before you invite them to submit. You can say like, hey, submit something that we can talk about. and you can talk about what that entails for your community, and think about your students' needs as you do that, and your safety in your school in what you talk about. This is such a loaded conversation right now, but in the end, hopefully you get a bunch of submissions from students with ideas, and you can create a shelf or a choice board with some poetry that you think is fantastic and want to show to them, and some poetry that they've submitted. And that could be a really cool way to give them some voice and agency in the class. Okay, there are a bunch more examples in the blog post as I'm scanning through it here. So many visual examples that I could talk you through, but I am kind of going to skip here now to the end, which is where we're going to talk about some ideas for how students can synthesize everything they learn when you build them a choice board / Webquest / Hyperdoc that they can click through and explore. A long time ago, when I first started doing this, I tended to correlate some kind of question with each section on the Webquest. And this is not how I do it anymore. But back then, I was just excited to get students discovering information online. And I wanted to make sure that they found each information nugget that was waiting on each different click that I had designed for them, right? So it was a little more like a scavenger hunt and a little less like open exploration leading them toward interesting insight. So back then I might say, explore this interactive net map and find the neighborhood where this thing happened and describe that neighborhood in 3 sentences. Now that's very specific, right? Or maybe I would say, watch this video and create a brief timeline of important events that happened in this year, right here in this blank space. And the thing about that is, yes, it can be effective. You can help students find information in interesting ways and be exposed to multimedia and pop around all the cool stuff on the internet. But it's also like a very prescriptive comprehension question type of way for them to process that information. And I'm moving away from that. I would rather not map each piece of digital exploration to a check it off type of question. At this point, I'd rather students be maybe generating a list of their own questions. What are they wondering as they're looking at all this stuff? Or creating a sketch note that pulls together from different areas that they've explored what really feels important to them, or connecting it to their own life, or connecting it to the text. Or maybe they're clicking around to get inspiration for a creative project and they'll want to be taking notes on how what they're discovering can help further their own project. Or maybe you want to just make it really free for them and say, like, I want you to do this, and then I want you to present back what you've learned through your own choice of mode, or your own choice of several modes if you want to make like a multimedia presentation of the information back. And that doesn't have to mean it's like 20 pages long with a podcast and a video. It could just mean like they create an illustration and grab a quote, or they have 5 bullet points and a short audio clip, or whatever, right? Depending on how extensive this Webquest is. So looking back, we talked about why Webquests can be so wonderful right now in the incredible information-rich internet age that we're in. We looked at some examples: building a Webquest for Shakespeare, building digital shelves, building mentor-based Webquests. We talked a little bit about how students can synthesize that information back. And I just want to point out one more time that I've probably talked you through about half the examples that actually exist in the blog post. But these Webquests are so visual, and that visual aspect is really part of what I want you to see this week. And I want you to get the templates that go with that visual aspect so you can use them and just drop in your own links, but also just kind of get that visual inspiration for designing your own. So I really want you to go and see the full show notes at nowsparkcreativity.com, or if you're on my email list, stay tuned for my email this week that's going to be all about this and share the templates with you. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.